we go back to the core, life is about time and relationships, right? So if we think that through, I'm playing the long game. In any business, anyone that's listening here, you should be playing the long game. And if I got to get revenue, and you're looking at it from monthly goals, great. But at the end of the day, you're playing that long game. So when you have that mentality, the power of podcasting is that long game. You've got to be consistent. The riches are really in how do I stay and show up consistently.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Reanimated Stories. This is Roger, and I am really excited today to have Greg with me. Greg, I had I've been connected to Greg, and it was a really interesting story. I don't want to give too much away of where he's at and what he's doing, because I want him to be able to speak to that. But I met him through a connection, and where I actually do my podcast, which is going to do a big play into this, he actually works for them and with them and does some amazing things. So Greg, welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for taking time out
Thank you,
today.
Roger, for having me.
Yeah. So Greg, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're at and what you
Yeah,
do?
I love how we started the story of the connection piece, because that is the core of who I am. Life is about time and relationships. So we think about it that way. It's like Mindy, shout out to Mindy, like she connected us and through how I know Mindy. So it just shows the trickle effect, right? So to answer your question, my background's in media sales, and I've transitioned into the world of podcasting for the last 5 years. I'm currently the head of relationships for RSS.com, which is one of the largest podcast hosting platforms. But before that, I've run some other businesses in the podcast space. But for me and anyone that's, I guess, listening here on the small business side, it's I lean into the power of connections and relationships. And I think podcasting, as we'll talk about, really gives you the access that you need as a small business to do all of that.
That's super fantastic. And you're talking about RSS, and Mindy had connected us. It was so funny because, as I mentioned to you, I know some people that do podcasts, so Eli and all them, and so it's one of those things, as you're talking about relationships and how podcasting, but just how that whole podcasting world and business can really build those relationships. And I think that that's so important. And so I love that point that you make with that. So tell us a little bit about how you kind of got into podcasting and kind of the impact that's
So
made.
my background's in media sales, as I said, 15 years or so. I worked for Yahoo, worked for a company that got acquired by CBS. So at the core, learned all these different avenues of the advertising world. And from that standpoint, calling on brands, calling on agencies and saying, hey, here's the inventory I've got and how do we get an RFP and all the fun stuff. But the core of that is really relationship driven. Yes, I was at Yahoo, so it's a big brand name, but we were going up against Google at that point. So no matter how great of a name Yahoo is, and we can look at where Yahoo is now, where Google is now, right? So we get the understanding of just the business trajectory there. But you're still fighting against the 800-pound gorilla for every dollar. So in that sense, you were always going, I'm the smaller guy, I'm David going against Goliath, and how do I compete with that? And for me, it's always been relationships. The core is what I've got, what I can offer, what the solution I have, whether it's the right thing or not, is second to some degree to who I am and what I'm able to bring. And the way I always looked at it is, I may not have the answer for you, but on the back end, I'm sitting here, talking to all these other agencies and what they're doing. I'm talking to all the other sellers in my realm and what we're working on, so we can share notes to understand if I can save you how many cold emails, how many cold pitches, and 30 to 60-minute meetings and lunch and learns where I can go, this is a person you need to be talking to here, and you like me because you're like, all right, I'm not going to buy from Greg, but at least I understand Greg's here to support, and that's it. Like at the end of the day, we are all in some form of support so whether you're selling, you're trying to sell to answer and help solve a problem for whoever the person you're working with. And so if you just going, this is my product, you should buy it, it's not going to work. It's like, what are you trying to do? And either I have to position it accordingly to solve that problem for you, or let me be the support of going, hey, here's someone that actually has what you need. And you build the know, like, and trust from that. So I did that, long story, did that for 15 years, but that's been the catalyst of my career. And so I fell into podcasting. I was at a mobile apps company, and we acquired apps, and 3 of the apps we acquired were in the podcasting space. So day one, founders like, go figure this out. I'm like, all right, well, I got millions of users on this listening platform. What do I do? And in that case, I went to the hosting platforms and said, look, I can scrub your podcast, or it would be a lot easier and a lot better for the consumer. And so let's think about the consumer in this standpoint, that if they hosted on your platform with one click, they were able to be distributed to our platform. And there's no extra work that they needed. And they got more millions of listeners that they're able to get access to, because podcasters and businesses as a whole want audience. And so then I went from there, built $1 million business on that side, went to an AI content repurposing engine, because how do I get people not to just think about listening to a podcast, but ultimately all the different audiences that you can create through this amazing medium? And then now here at rss.com, where I get to take all this knowledge, the advertising side, the listening side, the support for the last 5 years, and help businesses and help, I guess, hobbyists, anyone that should have a voice that wants to get out there, and give them a platform to do it.
That's so cool. I love the trajectory of that, of in that mind frame or the mind frame, the mindset that you have of thinking of that. I think that's so important. I had a conversation earlier and it was really more about, less transactions and more relationship. And just like you said, I may not be able to help you. Like I may not be able to help you in that, like maybe my product, my service, that's not what I do. But I actually know this other person, or actually I know two other people, or three, right? I know these people and I think you should meet with this person and you've built that relationship so that even if you're not the one to help them with your product or service or what you do, you've helped them in another way and you've connected them to somebody and that makes you that connector and that makes that helps them see like, oh, okay, Greg really trusts. I like what he does. I don't need that, but he has somebody that that he knows that can connect me, and that's I think that goes such a long way. And now with that podcasting space, as we're obviously in that space at the moment, and you can still kind of build on that. And you had just said there at the end, thinking through like podcasting and how we can build those relationships. How is it that in your opinion, how have successful podcasts built those relationships? And how do you see that kind of continuing on?
Yeah. I mean, we go back to the core, life is about time and relationships, right? So if we think that through, I'm playing the long game. In any business, anyone that's listening here, you should be playing the long game. And if I got to get revenue, and you're looking at it from monthly goals, great. But at the end of the day, you're playing that long game. If I hit these short goals, you've broken up your long goals into these short ones and these little milestones, but you're playing that long game. And if you can play that long game, some of which you don't know where the fruits of those little seeds that you're planting will actually come about. So when you have that mentality, the power of podcasting is that long game. You've got to be consistent. I'm not, and for everyone that's listening, right, we're talking about businesses. So we're not talking about a 8 series episode, a fiction or journalistic style story. The riches are really in how do I stay and show up consistently. And so if you think about podcasting as a relationship development tool, take us as an example, right? So Mindy introduced us. We get to talk. Let's say I was someone that you want to do business with. Great, you bring me onto your show. Had you been trying to actually cold call me and go, great, I want this. Or if Mindy introduced us and said, Greg, I think you should talk to Roger because he's got a product. I'm going to listen because Mindy's made that introduction, so relationships matter. But also I'm going to have a little guard up because I'm like, ooh, what's he trying to sell me here, right? So we always know from a psychology standpoint, there's some kind of level of what do you want from me? But at the end of the day, if I go, I want nothing from you, I just want to elevate you. So I want to bring you on to my podcast and I want to have your story. In this case, my story shared with your audience. But in the case of any small business, you're going to bring on prospects, people that you would love to do business with. Or if that doesn't align based on your business, which I'd question that, but maybe that doesn't. So you're going to bring on either testimonials or others that would make sense. Being strategic on who you're bringing on. And now you've got 50 episodes that you've developed a relationship. And it's not just a record, edit, publish, move on to the next person. It is how do I continue to build this? So in our case, we did a quote unquote pre-call to get to know each other. And now we're doing a recording. So if you think about that from your business standpoint, we now have Roger's had 90 minutes with me. In reality, we've done longer. We've talked longer than that, but like I've got 90 minutes with Roger. So think about that from your own prospect and your business standpoint. If I could give you 90 minutes with a person that's comfortable, that's vulnerable, that's relationship developing, as opposed to 90 minutes of how do I sell this person transaction, you're going to build that relationship. They're going to know, like, and trust you. They're going to want to work with you. But even if they don't work with you, you're getting, in this case, Roger's getting me to promote him to my audience. So if I don't end up buying from Roger, Roger gets access to my audience, who he probably wants to work with and sell to. And so now my audience is now knowing about Roger. And so that becomes the incredible part of podcasting when you use it as a relationship engine to fuel conversations that you normally would not be able to have. And we all in business are always looking for, how do I get more business? And the other side is, how do I figure out how do I market myself? And now a podcast gives you the ability to not only have your guests promote you and market you, but you've got all this great assets, all this great content that you're able to cut up, whether it's clips, whether it's a blog, newsletter, show notes. In my mind, that's just scratching the surface of all the content that you can create from these conversations to help you market. And now you get to say, or in this case, Roger gets to say, this is what Greg said on my show, instead of Roger saying me, 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 me. And so once again, it becomes, how do I serve a larger audience through the relationships I'm able to develop, the content that's able to come of that, and the connection. And I'm barely scratching the surface, but now you start getting to understand of how a podcast can become this growth engine for you, this relationship developing tool for you, and give you this amazing legacy of content that you are able to go out there and talk through with connections that you never would have been able to.
Yeah, that's amazing. We could probably just stop the podcast right there and just be like, all right, well, there you go. You everyone have a great afternoon. That was amazing. I love that. I love the mindset that you always bring. And we've talked before of reframing this in the idea of relationships. Of yes, obviously there's those podcasts that are like, hey, we're gonna watch, the new Apple TV Plus or, new Stranger Things, and we're going to talk about it. Right. And that's obviously that's building a relationship there and, with a different sort of audience. But, small business, you're thinking like, how can I get in front of other people? But also, how can I also amplify other people as well? And how can I bring them on? Because I think that you had you hit the nail on the head when you were like, because now you get to be a part of their audience as well. And I may have never been able to meet that audience necessarily because maybe I'm not in that area or I wouldn't know how to get there. But you've been able to do that, with your prospect or the person that you have on there. And for me personally, as I've been doing this, as cool as it is to just kind of be able to do this, I love having guests like yourself come on. And, in 5 minutes, it's like, oh, wow, that's like a masterclass right there. Like I'm getting all of this cool information for free and they're just coming on and we have this relationship that we're able to talk about that. And I think that that's absolutely wonderful. What is, so thinking of that, what is a cool story that you've maybe been on a podcast and kind of seen some of the fruit of like what you've talked about, content and the relationship building and all that? Has there been a podcast that you've been on that you've kind of seen that played out or even seen that play out even for another
I
person?
mean, the stories, I think my LinkedIn content is half of these stories, right? We get so caught up in downloads and get caught up in, okay, if I'm going to start a podcast, then how do I grow this? How do I make sure that people are seeing it? And then we go, because we're metric driven, it's just the ego is part of that, is going, oh, no one's listening to this. I'm only getting 30, and then 2 of those people are my parents, right? The joys of it is you always say the best time to start something was yesterday. The second best time to start is today, right? And once you start, you stay consistent and we grow from there. There was a podcast that I was on when the gentleman started. I'm not going to say he was nothing in terms of volume, but he was nowhere near where he is now. And so had I said, you're not big enough, I'm not going to go on your show, what I would have missed then is, now that he's a top 200 Apple podcast doing millions of downloads,
Oh,
I would
wow.
have missed his growth, his business investment into the craft, into what he's doing, that my episode that was so far the back catalog is still now getting good views and good engagement and good listens because he's grown. People are going to be tied to either an episode that he's done presently, or it's all evergreen content. So if you were saying, you know what, I'm going to say no, or my numbers aren't growing, we have no clue where it's going to take us. And so I love that story. But then if we put a mindset on that of, if you live in a small town, most likely most people know you, right? Think about the country songs. I live in a small town and dating in a small town. I'm blanking on the artist's name, but like that's what comes to mind. So if you live in a bigger city, it's harder to find your people. I live in an apartment complex with probably 200 people. My best friend could possibly be in this building, but I've never crossed paths with them. And the same thing goes with your podcast. If you're thinking about how do I grow this? How do I get the content out there? You just got to keep doing it because you don't know who all of a sudden in my building is going to walk into me one day and go, "You're the man of my dreams," or "You're my best friend," or whatever the case may be, right? So the same thing goes for the consistency of podcasting and the joys of having that relationship that you're able to develop, the relationship that you're trying to work, but the unknown of where that relationship, where the connection, where the next listen may come from unexpectedly. You have this huge spike of like all of a sudden Greg's episode with Roger spiked. Like, what happened? Like, why? I don't know. I did something timely. You have no clue where that could take you. So the stories in terms of going on someone's show or the value of having a podcast and building that relationship and then building an audience and the content that comes out of it. Once again, I go with time and relationships. I don't know where the timing is going to happen. I just know if I invest in a relationship, things will happen. I'll pause there. Yeah.
Yeah, I think you had said at the beginning, the best time to start was yesterday, and the second best time is to start today. And you're building those relationships. Just like you said, it's building those relationships. It's taking them time and time again, and realizing, like you had said earlier on, that we have to play the long game. We have to play the long game, and we have to think like, okay, well, I got 5 people, and unfortunately, one of them was not my parents, right? Because they don't understand technology. But it's those things of, okay, well, I'm doing this for a reason, and I'm doing this to accomplish something and to get to know more people and to get people to know other people more. And you're building on those relationships. And just like I said, you don't know when all of a sudden it's just gonna take off. And the content that you're able to get out of it, just like you said, when I first even thought of like doing a podcast, I literally was just talking to my computer screen, not in a crazy way, right? I was just pretending like I was on a podcast, answering questions that I think people would want to know about like SEO and web design and all that sort of stuff, blah, blah, blah. And so I felt kind of dumb, but after doing that, I like looked at it and I said, oh man, I can get a lot of content out of this. But it also made me think through, like, not only can I get video out of it, but I can also like write like a little post about it. And, I can maybe send it to somebody. And then I was like, oh, I can actually put this on my website. I can put this on a blog. I can, and so it's thinking through that content. And just like you said, you don't know when somebody's going to come in and be like, "Hey, Greg, you're my new best friend," right? It's the same thing of like, "Oh, hey, that one blog that you wrote, that one post that you put, I really resonated with that." And you were like, "Oh, wow, that was like 5 months ago, and I barely remember that." And and it's like, "Oh yeah, okay, that's right." And then you're able to build that conversation out and build that relationship and continue to keep going. So that's absolutely great. I love
You're
that.
bringing up, or I'll interrupt you, but
Yeah, go ahead.
I
Yeah.
remember going to Podcast Movement, one of the keynote speakers there. He started as an SDR, so sales development rep, and he's like, "I'm new. How am I going to learn?" So he started a podcast and started bringing on people to learn, and that was his reason why.
Oh,
Why am I
that's
going to create a podcast? Well, how else do I have, in a sense, mentorship and every conversation with people that have been doing this so I can start
that's
learning?
awesome.
And because he was so early in the days of this content engine, his stuff was getting picked up. And then he got picked up by Salesforce and like, "Hey, you seem to be talking about this," right? His career blossomed just because he was trying to learn and he used his podcast as a learning engine that created all these new mentorships with these leaders in sales, if we want. And now his career is blossomed and he's the sales guy in that regards. Like, so you have no clue where that's going to take you. So the second thing I want to bring up that you pointed out and just we were talking about is strategy. What's your why? And that is the biggest thing. So for you is creating content so that I could have this, so it'd be easy for me to get video content that I could put out there so people know me. I've then got the blog content up there. So you understood what your why was. Like, I'm doing this, I'm spending the time, 'cause it's time intensive, labor intensive to create content so that I hope that other people see it. And I'm not focused entirely on what are my views, what are my engagements, what are my likes, what is that? Because part of that also then comes into the comments. Part of it is just putting the content out there and then seeing who's commenting or tagging people so they can see that content. There's a strategy to it. And once again, that's all bidding, that's all creating relationships, that's all creating a connection as opposed to content for just content's sake. I have to invest the time to create that content. I have to invest the time to actually engage with people because they want to know you. They don't want to just, great, this is Roger's content. And I'm guessing then when you added in guests into your component, now you're like, hold on. I don't have to sit here in front of a camera and talk to myself weirdly. I can sit here in front of a camera and talk to someone else, get some of their knowledge, but also build a relationship. So now you've elevated not only the content engine that you were already creating, but you've now created a whole new relationship engine that is fueling Roger, his know, like, and trust, his business. So anyone that's listening to this, like, those are the key pieces you could start thinking through is there is effort that goes into this, but the effort, just like anything we do, is going to be there as you put in the time and the long-term gains out of it, you'll see.
Yeah, no, the point that you had made about like, oh, I'm making this content, in this, I'm throwing this content out there, and then leaving those, putting that content, whether it's on, LinkedIn, Facebook, wherever, and then thinking through like, oh, okay, wow, people are actually commenting on it. And is, and that's like a second layer of building that relationship, because now it's maybe this person wouldn't have necessarily commented on that before or even known, but maybe just something in the algorithm picked it up and they were like, oh, interesting. And so it's, well, I can just leave it alone. But it's like, no, like now you have that conversation, which all of a sudden, hey, it becomes a longer conversation, and then you're chatting face to face, and then maybe they're on the podcast or you're on theirs or something like that, and then they're able to connect you. It's those things like where it's like it has to be about building those relationships. And yeah, we're building a business, we're doing all that stuff, but you're also building those relationships as you're doing that. And that's probably been the biggest thing that I've learned is that you're building these relationships, and part of that building of the relationships is pouring into other people and connecting them with other people. So just like how they saw your content and the algorithm had just shown it to them, and then now they're able to meet your people as much as you're able to meet their people. And so there's that like cyclical thing of really trying to think that. So you just really gave a great thought of that people need to really think through like strategy, their why. Am I just kind of, talking to my computer screen weirdly, like what is the strategy? If people are thinking, okay, you know what, Greg, fine. I think maybe I should start a podcast, be on a podcast. What do I need to think of? What do they need to think of to say, okay, I want to start a podcast, but also I want to be on podcasts? And those may be maybe a little different, but what do people need to start thinking of when they're doing that?
Strategy is the key, whether you're which side of the coin you're going with there, hosting or guesting, right? And the strategy is of course the content repurposing that comes out of it. So for this case, I'm your guest, and you could go ahead and create assets for me, which you should. So anyone that's on the hosting side, create assets because you want your guests to be able to do that. You want to make it easy for your guests to want to share and post. Don't expect it. Don't be dumbfounded when it doesn't happen. But if you don't have the assets and the system set up for them, then yes, it's not going to happen because the truth be told, I'm on your show now. Even if you were able to turn this around and go, Greg, an hour later, here you go. I blacked out. Like, I have no clue what I just said in this last hour. So if you send it to me, I'm going to be like, what did I say? Because if it's an hour later, I'm probably either eating lunch on another call. Who knows where my brain is that I don't remember. And I have to imagine I'm not the only person that thinks that way. I'm guessing other people have those memory issues. So you've got to make sure that you're giving your guest a very easy way to promote and support you. So systems in that regards. And then if you are the guest, in this case, even if I get those assets from you, doesn't mean necessarily those are the assets that I want to promote. So having a system in place, if we go to systems or getting tactical here, right? RSS.com is where I would host. Cast Magic, the former company I worked for, is where I go ahead and take all my content and get it repurposed for text-based assets. You've got all these video assets that you can go ahead and make clips and do that. Take your pick. You can't go wrong. But those are little things that you're able to go ahead and start segmenting so that on my side as a guest, I have the assets I need and I want to. As a host, you've got it. So there's a lot in terms of that system that you need in place. If we go a little back before that, systems and understanding your why, I'm launching my first podcast right now. So systems is what I'm focused the most thing on. I mean, it all depends on when you guys listen to this, right? But like one of the most things I'm focused on is I'm spending 3 months in setting up my systems so that when I actually get to the point of recording, I don't have the fade. I don't have this is too hard, because what ends up happening with most podcasters is, and I get it, most of us will say, just hit record. Worry about everything. You don't need the best setup. You don't need the biggest mic. And it's all so true. But what you do need is a system in place, because nothing's harder than everything's jumbled. I don't know what I don't know. And then once you start you try to get into a rhythm. But the problem with trying to get in a rhythm when you don't have a system in place, you're hacking everything together and not realizing, oh, I needed to do this. I needed to do that. And now I'm trying to figure out, well, how does this work into my workflow? And just think about most tools you probably use, right? Most of us will sign up for a tool, SaaS or software of any kind, and we'll set it up for ourselves. And then we'll never really think about all the different features that the tool's coming with, because you're like, hold on, I got to learn something new, but I've already just learned this. Happens with this. Like, we're recording right now in Descript, but Descript used to be Squadcast. So it's like, oh, how did those integrate, right? So there's understanding of the tools, but how the tools evolve. So if you can set your system up so that when there's new things that are coming out, it's easy for you to just adapt and adjust, as opposed to this is an overwhelming task. Now this content engine, this relationship engine becomes too hard that you stop. If you remember your why if you're doing this is not for downloads. You're not doing this for massive reach. You're doing this because it gives me the relationships that I never would have been able to have unless I was trying to get this person to buy from me. And then it becomes transactional, which is what you need. You need transactions, but it's still not the same level of love and care that you'll get from a relationship that you'll develop. Because even if I don't buy from Roger, I'm now telling my network. If Roger went ahead, and we could all admit this about our own businesses, if Roger just did a call with me and he tried to sell me, and at the end of a call, once that Roger sold me, he's like, hey, who else do you know that you would introduce me to, because you clearly just bought this product and you must think that it's valuable. Who else would you? Referrals are great, but how many of those people in that conversation actually go through and do it? Very few, right? But now you've got a podcast where, great, I can develop a relationship. It'll take a little more time for me to actually maybe win that business, but I now am getting that promotion, that referral, that opportunity because the network's there. So you're doing this once again. And if you remember your why, it's not the downloads, it is creating those systems in place so that you can have the relationships, that you can maximize the opportunities that you're having.
Really quick before I forget, you had mentioned, the process in well, you're talking about it now, the process in the systems. And so when we had originally talked, you had mentioned, yeah, are you, like you want to think about doing this and you want to think about doing that. And I said, oh yeah. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm not doing that. I was literally just like, if I press record and I get it edited, and stuff. And so, yeah. And I totally was like, oh man, I need to make it easy for them to share it instead of, hey, here's the stuff, go figure it out. It's, hey, here's the stuff. You can, if you don't like it, go ahead and, take this video and do it. But I got some stuff ready for you. If you want to promote it, feel free. And so I'm actually having to go back to some of my earlier ones and be like, oh, okay, sorry, and just kind of go back and and which is nice because it's also kind of rekindling that relationship that we already have, but it would have been nice if I had the process that I'm implementing now already in there. So I think that that's great having the process and the strategy for that. And so you mentioned a couple of different tools, and I'll also put those in the links in the description as well. But Greg, where can people go to interact with you, to connect with you? Where can they go online for that?
I live on LinkedIn, so I hate to say I'm the do as I say, not as I do kind of person, right? I don't have a website. I don't have a newsletter. Who knows? I've got a domain, but right now I live on LinkedIn. And as much as I say social media platforms, because LinkedIn is a social media platform. Like if you build an audience on someone else's platform, doesn't mean you get to reach them, doesn't mean you own that and they can change their algorithm. So my views may all of a sudden go from X number to X minus, right? But that's where I live because I truly believe in the personal connections. You'll go to my profile, you'll see life is about time and relationships. I want to connect, not just have followers, but have conversations. I'm a relationship generator. So for me, I'll talk to pretty much anyone because you have no clue. Not only am I going to get you getting your own podcast, but I have no clue where that conversation goes, which is what I love about podcasting is everyone's got a unique business. Everyone's got a unique story. Podcasting is what kind of bring us together, but I'm here to help you figure out what is your business and who can I connect you to? Or have you thought about these tools? So please reach out and find me. And then the other side of that is the greatest joy you can do is reaching out to me. And then I can go back to Roger and go, Roger, someone who he has no clue who's listening. And that's the hard part about, podcasting is you don't really understand who's listening to you. Email, you get to see who that email person is or the email of that person. But like a podcast, I have no clue who's listening. So if you reached out and said, hey, I heard you on Roger's podcast, I'm going to screenshot that and go, Roger, here's a person that's listening to your show. And he's going to be so excited about that because he's like, I did not know that. I had no clue that Sally
Yeah.
in North Carolina was listening to this show, right? So by all means, please find me on LinkedIn, reach out. Happy to help you on relationship development and the power of podcasting as well.
And Greg, you've been a huge resource. So yes, please connect with Greg. You mentioned really quick, you had mentioned about, because you don't really know where the conversation is going to go. And one of the other podcast episodes that I had, we were talking and then we started talking about bees and beehives and that, preserving bees. So definitely need to check out that episode because yeah. And so I was like, well, that was the first 10 minutes of it. And I said, well, okay, that's not really what the podcast is about, but it was an interesting segue because I had just briefly mentioned I found that kind of interesting and we were started talking about that. But yeah, it's one of those things like where, I had forgotten that about that particular person that they had done that. And then I mentioned it and then they came back, and it was just like one of those like natural conversations. But it, even in that relationship that we had already had off camera of connecting and business and all that sort of stuff, we were able to connect right there in real time, in a different way. So yeah, relationship building is so crucial. And I love the mindset that you have. And I think that that is such a crucial thing to have. So thank you so much, Greg, for joining me today. I always say coming out, but I do this online. Like you're not coming out to me. So thank you so much for joining me today,
Thank you so
Greg.
much, Roger, and everyone for listening. I appreciate it.